just so we don't get shit twisted, when I talk about the United States of Degenerates or the United Lunatics of America, or the Ununited Degenerates of America, it doesn't mean I'm talking about all the people, okay? There's some damn good people in America. There's some good famous people. Most people, I've met some damn good people from America. Like Bert Cheatham being one. Bert Cheatham is one of the most kindest, most gentlemanly men who could fuck you up if he wanted to back in the day. Probably still could. I believe from West Virginia. He's raced super sedans, he's raced late models, small body NASCAR, all that. Yeah, he's a methanol head. Not a meth head, a methanol head. Right? Slight difference. What I'm going to say here, I'm just going to film a tiny little bit of this. I'll leave a link in the description, as I always do if it's worth watching. Lads, learn how to be a fucking man. Not an alpha male fucking gronk. A man. Huh? Bit of volume. Isn't there volume? Science. There we go.
And the other thing as well, I think, and by the way, your point about how men and women can teach, like, I mean, when my son was a baby, I was just standing there observing and like making notes, like, oh, she did that, okay. And by her example, she showed me all the stuff that you're supposed to do in that time. So we learn from each other. But when we're talking about young boys, and you know, you talked about fatherlessness, lack of male role models, I think this is where some of these things are coming from, because the other thing is men are just fundamentally, I think, much more comfortable with aggression.
Yeah.
We just know it's part of life, whereas for a woman it's a very unpleasant thing to even deal with, particularly male aggression. I saw this great clip of a friend of mine called Paul Attia, Peter's brother, and he talked about the fact that his boys were in some kind of fight. It got very intense, and he basically helped them see that aggression is great when you're defending your brother from a wild animal or whatever. And that's, I think, another thing that has perhaps been suppressed, where you now see it come out in unpleasant ways, where it's like you haven't been taught that aggression is useful and good, just it's got to be channeled right, because sometimes I feel the female reaction is to just go, let's shut this down, you know?
Yeah, well, and the problem is that you can't totally shut it down. You can't extinguish it.
No.
And you don't want to, because no civilization in history has ever been protected by docile, weak men that were afraid of conflict. That's just not how that happens.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll say this. Feminists, there is nothing feminine about a feminist, nor is there anything manly about you. All we see is a fucking fruitcake. Sorry, but that's all we see are people who are willingly doing damage but don't even know they're doing it. That's all we see of you. You're willingly doing damage that you do not even comprehend that you're doing. You don't know you're doing damage, but you're doing it willingly. Right? Tracking? Right. Kind of brings me to the lady that came here as an ambulance officer to see to me, who made fucking brash fucking assumptions, thinking they were presumptions, asking me stupid fucking questions that I can't even tell you what the fucking answers I gave her to were. I was in too much pain and I was too busy trying to organise my kids to pack me a go bag and to give them some brief instructions, because the ambulance told me I probably wouldn't be coming home that night. And I had drenched clothes on and I couldn't get a word in sideways, and every 5 minutes she was putting a hand over me, holding me down, telling me to calm down. When I wasn't even trying to get up, I was just trying to get a fucking word in sideways, lady. As an ambulance officer, you're probably alright, but as a human being, you're a fucking idiot. Right? I'm the man of this fucking house. Don't ever forget that. Right.
So I think it's important to understand that while aggression, all of us are prone to want to avoid discomfort on some level. We typically don't prefer it, right? And that's understandable, but it is a reality. And the real question is the discernment that's supposed to, again, in determining is what level of aggression is appropriate for this situation. Why am I utilizing this level of aggression? To what extent do I plan to use that aggression, right? Is it till he stops moving, or what is it? Or is it just to where he's restrained, whatever it is? That all takes a great deal of training and discipline. And in order to train and discipline others, you have to put yourself into those environments. Not unregulated environments, but training for those purposes and developing the appropriate intellectual, physical, and emotional practices and disciplines is very important. And again, it's one of those things where a woman is naturally going to be inclined to, let's maintain the peace. She is able to do that and to be in an environment where she feels so much more secure when she knows her husband has it. When she knows that her husband has control of the situation, she feels safe and secure. Again, I have to convey that to my son, which means you're going to have to watch your son go through difficult things that you never had to watch me go through. But this is part of the process. And again, a lot of that comes from talking between husband and wife beforehand. But I'll use this as an example. I was speaking at it was a young men's luncheon. It was run by Young America's Foundation, so a conservative group. And they hadn't done they had done a young women's luncheon for the last 10 years. They hadn't done a young men's one for 10 years. And so they decided they would bring it up, and they asked me if I would speak at it. And so typically when someone reads off my bio at one of these things, there's 3 things mentioned. Nick was a former Green Beret combat veteran. Nick has served 10 years in the Virginia General Assembly, and Nick has a sizable social media following. Now, in this group of young men, the vast majority of them either are involved in politics or want to be involved in politics professionally on some level. They want to be on staff, they want to run for office, whatever it is, work for a think tank. And then some of them also are interested in joining the military. But out of a room of 300 young men, I would say maybe 10% were interested in the military. All of them were interested in politics on one way level. And so I said, all right, gentlemen, when those 3 things get read off in my bio, which are you most impressed with? And all of them, almost in unison, Green Beret combat veteran. So isn't that fascinating? The vast majority of you in here are not going to join the military. You respect the military, but you're not interested in serving in that capacity. And even if you are, you're not necessarily interested in doing what I did within the military. And yet, every young man in this room thinks that's the most impressive thing. Why? Because that's the credential that is listed off about me that suggests to you that if someone violent were to come through that door right now, I would know what to do about it. And probably come out on top, right? If that is the instinct that I believe God has written into all of us, well then maybe we should take some cues from that. Not because we've all got to be soldiers or, UFC fighters or whatnot, because we're not all supposed to do that. We're not all called to do that. But maybe we should all recognize that there's something in you that wants to be able to have some capability and capacity for this. And so you should start asking yourself, what do I need to do in order to properly develop and train that? Because it isn't all just physical. If you are physically strong, you're able to shoot, you're able to fight, but you're a freaking idiot, you're going to lose more than you win. If you don't have any control of your emotions, you're a monster. You're now a terror for your family, for your community, for your country. But if you line up all these things, if you have a strong spiritual bearing which says, I know why I have these, I know why God gave me these desires. I have the intellectual capacity to be able to read a situation and know when to use them. I have the emotional maturity to understand when to restrain myself and when to utilize what I need to. And I have the physical capability and capacity to actually execute it. You are now the sort of person that can be dangerous on behalf of the things you love, but never to the things you love. But it takes all of that. And regardless of what you do, I always think there's something beneficial about young men embracing that part of their personality, embracing that part of their masculinity, and developing it to, an appropriate level for what they want to do in their life.
And it's so interesting you talked about the physical aspects of men, because one of the things that I noticed, so everybody knows this, but I repeat it. So I used to teach, and particularly...
Whoa, what?
Yeah, I know.
Look, this is a good thing.
Yeah. But in one part of East London, in a place called Newham, where majority of my kids didn't have a dad, and I used to see my kids come in. I used to teach year 6 with 10 and 11-year-olds. I used to see them come in at 10, and mum used to be able to control them. But 11 and 12 is when the gang started to circulate, because the boys started to go through puberty. Mum couldn't control them anymore physically. Dad wasn't there. They are craving male camaraderie, approval. And if mum can't control them, then the boys are going to leave. So this male dominance, and people may be uncomfortable or squeamish about it, it's really important, particularly from an older male.
You know, this part is, I think growing up in an environment where I'm 46. So I grew up in an environment where we still revered traditional masculinity on some level, but you definitely had, the feminist waves coming in and whatnot. And there was kind of these notions about humanity and human nature and what we could train and what we could engineer through the right programs and education. And I think we're getting back to a point where people are starting to recognize that, yes, nurture matters, but so does nature, right? So does nature. And instead of us arrogantly presuming that we've just reached this level of either enlightenment or scientific knowledge that we can just negate all of that and run people through the appropriate programs and get the results we want. Okay, we're several decades into this experiment. How's it working out for us? Maybe the thousands of years of human history that came before us have something to teach us about human nature. Not that we have to adopt everything that came before us, but as C.S. Lewis likes to point out, the chronological snobbery of the moderns who think that, well, we would never behave that way because we're just so much more enlightened. Like, okay, yeah, go ahead and, what is it, 9 meals? You're 9 meals away from chaos. So I think we need to appreciate the fact that this seems to be a common phenomenon among the males of the population across space and time and culture. And the real question we have to ask ourselves is, okay, again, maybe God put it there for a reason. Maybe there's some positive manifestations of this. And maybe our job as parents, as fathers, as mothers, as a society is to help direct things in those positive manifestations. One of the most bizarre things about this whole concept of toxic masculinity, right? Let's see if I can get canceled here real quick. There's a point to it. The point to it is, I'm going to look at these masculine traits. And I'm going to ask myself, are there negative manifestations of those masculine traits? Yes, of course. Of course there is. Okay, good. Do I want to avoid the negative manifestations of the masculine? Yes, of course. But don't make the trait itself the problem. The trait itself is not toxic. It's the way it's manifesting, right? Because I could just as easily say the same thing about femininity. Yes, there are things that we generally associate with feminine traits. Are there negative and positive manifestations of those? No. How dare you? Right? Yeah, of course there are. Of course there are. And all of us know and are sometimes represented by insufferable women, right? But the point is that just like masculinity is not toxic for the traits that it contains, neither is femininity toxic for the trait it contains. But like anything else, aggression is a good thing when I'm using it to protect innocent people from those that would cause harm in them. It is a bad thing when I'm using it to exploit and hurt innocent people in order to get what I want. And that used to be something that we just kind of understood.
And it's such a profound point, because these traits are inherent within men. They flow through all of us. You can use them for positive or you can use them for negative. But if, as a society, you demonize those traits and you effectively drive them underground, you're not going to get rid of them. And what these traits are actually going to do is they're going to end up mutated. They're going to be like a bone that doesn't grow properly. And as a result of that, what is going to come out is not pretty. So if you think about aggression, male dominance, pride, desire for success, I mean, all of those traits can be used to describe Andrew Tate. And maybe Andrew is a result of a society that has demonized men and the instincts that we have to such a point where they naturally gravitate towards a character like that.
Well, I think, so first of all, I think it's absolutely true that when it is one thing to not teach a young man the way to develop those traits. It is another thing to demonize those traits. Right? When you fail to teach them, they might go to a gang or they might do something else, who knows. When you demonize them as a society, you actually pervert this entire process in a way that is far more dangerous.
And we'll leave it there. Oh, he was just getting into that, wasn't he? Eh? That was just getting interesting, wasn't it? He was just going, oh, this is a fucking good conversation. You'll find quite a few of them in trigonometry. Now and then you'll find a fucking stupid one too. Certain provocateurs like Morgan, what's his name? Piers Morgan. I fucking can't stand that wanker. He's a fucking idiot. All he is a troublemaker. Stephen Fry, there's another one. Highly intelligent. Highly fucking gets under your skin too. Just for the sake of it, I think. He does make some good points, but he doesn't make any valid points. Okay? He refuses to see how bad things can be there for a good reason. And just blames, because of that, that's his whole take on why he refuses that there is a God, and if there is a God, he's an insufferable prick, or what do you call him, a horrible pretentious prick or something you called him, because he wants him to please explain the worm in Africa whose sole purpose is to burrow into the eyeballs of children. Okay, that's a horrible thing. Is that its sole purpose in life, or is that how it's ended up? Because, is he trying to sell us on something? Or is that something that's happened a few times because those children have lived in bad environments? There's all sorts of parasitic fucking worms. We've all got them all the time. How does that make you feel? We've all got parasites all the time. Ooh, you say. Well, it's a fact. Been to a public toilet lately? Welcome to the world of parasites. Weeded the garden lately without a pair of gloves on? Welcome to the world of parasites and nematodes and microbials. You're never going to avoid them. It's just some happen to be really bad, like heartworm, tapeworm, horsehair worm, horsehair nematomorpha. Nematomorpha is it's a derivative word of nematode. Nematode is a worm. There you go. Your basic garden variety worm is a nematode. It's a nematomorphous. Nematomorphosis. Learn something every day, don't you? So show this to all your favourite fucking feminist fucking idiots, just if you want to trigger them. Because ladies, you are not doing the world a favour. You're not even doing yourself a favour. You're not doing your kids a favour, especially not doing your kids a favour. And you need to get out of the fucking education system because you're fucking toxic. Alright? Get some Jesus in your life. God bless you, some brr brr.